Welcome to the CISO Signal True Cybercrime Podcast. I'm Jeremy Ladner. This breach didn't start with malware or ransomware or a dramatic takedown. It started with something far simpler and far more dangerous: a single phished password, a SaaS vendor, and an attacker who suddenly had the keys to thousands of downstream victims. In March of 2022, HubSpot confirmed that attackers had quietly slipped past its defenses. Weeks later, Klaviyo revealed the same. On paper, the SaaS companies were the ones breached, but in reality, the real targets were the businesses depending on them, especially Bitcoin and crypto firms whose customers suddenly found themselves in the crosshairs. Because once the attackers controlled a vendor's internal tools, they didn't need to break into every company individually. They could impersonate them. Emails crafted with perfect branding, landing pages designed to harvest seeds, credentials, and anything a person needed to protect. A compromise in the middle, weaponized at the edges. So the question becomes, who was really hacked, and how do you defend against an adversary who never touches your infrastructure? Because they've already infiltrated the inbox of the vendor you trust every single day. This week's guest CISO co-host is Scott Kisser, Chief Information Security Officer at Swan Bitcoin, a company directly affected by this attack. Scott's career spans more than 2 decades, leading security operations at Salesforce, DocuSign, Amazon, and many, many more. He has built global security programs, led intelligence teams, and defended some of the world's most targeted systems across cloud, SaaS, and fintech. Scott, it's great to finally have you on the show. Welcome to the podcast.
Great to see you again, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on. Glad it worked out.
Are you ready to get started?
Absolutely.
Let's begin the investigation. We are in the midst of a ceaseless war, not of bombs or bullets, but of breaches, firewalls, and silent incursions. The targets, our borders, our banks, our commerce, and the critical infrastructure that underpins a free civilization. The enemy is cloaked in code, fueled by greed, glory, and a desire for chaos. This is the story of the unseen protectors, the nameless generals, the CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers. They are the guardians at the gate, the watchers on the wall, ever vigilant and always listening for the CISO Signal. Act 1. The Treasure Hunt. In mid-March of 2022, HubSpot confirmed what many security teams fear most. A single employee account had been phished, and with it, an intruder slipped in through the breach, gaining access to dozens of customer environments, most of them tied to Bitcoin and cryptocurrency companies. Names, emails, and contact details. Not private keys, not ledgers, but enough to draw a clean line from marketing lists to real users holding real value. Among them was Swan Bitcoin. And somewhere in that 24-hour fog of alerts and emails, a notification landed on the desk of Swan's CISO, Scott Kisser. Okay, Scott, this is it. You know you've been attacked. What's your first move?
When I first learned about this breach, my first indication is, how are our systems? How is Swan Bitcoin's systems? Is there anything to worry about? Initial checks and everything is sound on our side allowed us to focus directly with the HubSpot team. To their credit, they had an amazing customer outreach, of course, during these critical events. We quickly learned that Swan Bitcoin was not the sole target. HubSpot reached out, and with their early information about the breach, they specifically confirmed it was on their platforms. It was due to a phishing breach. And then also that others were involved as well. From that moment on, we're in triage mode, working with HubSpot to make sure we can assist them as best possible, but more importantly, we can take care of our clients, our customers, and make sure that our customers are apprised of what's going on and what data was involved.
HubSpot would later confirm that this wasn't some zero-day hiding in their code. It was something older, simpler, and far more human. An employee was involved in a message and a request that felt routine, a login page dressed up to look like Okta. In the end, the attacker didn't need to break in because, like a vampire from a classic horror film, they only needed one thing: an invitation. And with a single social engineering click, they were welcomed past the threshold. From there, the stolen login opened the door to internal tools, the same tools that guarded customer portals.
Very quickly, we learned that a critical administrator on the HubSpot platform was phished. The information that we received from HubSpot was it was a SMS text, a link that looked like Okta. The setup for the phish was also paired with a phone call. And the phone call told the attack victim, we're going to send you an SMS text. We need you to re-authenticate to the Okta login. Ultimately, that's exactly how that user was compromised.
Once inside, the attackers didn't hesitate. They weren't after HubSpot's brand. They were after HubSpot's customers, and not all customers, just the ones whose clients held Bitcoin. Customer portals became directories. Marketing lists became targeting maps. Every field, every record, every export button was now ammunition. And in a single step, the boundary between we use a SaaS provider and we just exposed our users became razor thin.
You can build security and build confidence in platforms, but the human is the weakest link in a lot of these supply chains. There are a lot of factors that go into social engineering, making sure the employee or the target is under duress, using language that is coercive, using language that is threatening for that attacker to hit the target with some action. And so whether it's an email, a phone call, or an SMS, there are ways to, gin up the conversation to make sure that that target is taking action. It is absolutely critical that everybody knows what's at stake.
Okay, how about some advice? What is the high-level advice you can offer to employees of organizations who may not be on the security front lines in the traditional sense, but still may be targets of social engineering and phishing attacks?
Some of the simple things that we want to focus on is trusting the sender. It's very easy to go into an email in your inbox. If it says this email's from ABC, to do an actual check on domain of the email lines up with just the name field. And also like the typical stuff of threatening language. Is it asking for something abnormal? Gone are the days of misplaced English or misplaced sentences with the tools and technology that's available today. These are well-written, well-crafted, well-delivered type of attacks. I think customers and users of these services should absolutely understand what's normal behavior for my provider to contact me. Should I expect a phone call? Is it Friday afternoon? Is it sent with a sense of urgency? Is it to gain your trust? And ultimately, I think users should be able to, at any point, hang up, delete the email, pick up your own phone, and call the service provider number to make sure everything's okay with your account. I would say 9 out of 10 type phishing emails start with, there's a problem with your account. Well, okay, that's great. I'm going to hang up and call the official number, or I'm going to hang up and send an email into the official customer support area. I think that's critically important, and it changes the way of normal business today.
Act 2. Harvesting the Haul. Officially, the breach hit a SaaS provider in Cambridge, but unofficially, its impact rippled downstream straight into the Bitcoin firms whose users' data now sat neatly exported in a criminal's spreadsheet. Swan wasn't hacked, its systems held. Its wallets were untouched. But the attacker had gained something far more operationally valuable: a complete index of crypto customers that they would now convert into a list of targets.
Within HubSpot, they phished a senior level admin for their portal. Once they had access, they immediately worked to find all of HubSpot's cryptocurrency clients, and then they did a data dump for all of those clients' customers. And it was very precise, very targeted, and now that they have this trove of information, they can go play their game forever.
Within days, the quiet compromise of a SaaS account turned into a deafeningly loud battle zone in customer inboxes. Emails that looked like familiar brands, subject lines that sounded like routine security notices, pages designed to capture recovery seeds and reset passwords or verify accounts before something terrible supposedly happened. For Swan, the breach hadn't touched internal systems, but it had given attackers a clean list of who to impersonate and who to scare.
Immediately our response focused on customer outreach, customer identification, who was involved in this data set loss. Not everybody was involved. And how do we reach out to them and explain to them what happened? Now that the attackers have this data set, you should expect to be phished. It's going to look like an impersonation of Swan Bitcoin. It's going to look like an impersonation of outreach. Here's our official paths of communication. Here's how we reach out to you. A lot of customers don't understand the official paths of communication. If I'm a customer and all of a sudden, I get 10 phone calls coming in from, they all say they're Swan Bitcoin or they all say they're BlockFi. As a customer of these platforms, is it abnormal that I'm getting outreach?
To the attacker, this was a numbers game with a personal touch. Call enough users, send enough emails, sound just close enough to legitimate support, use the right language, maybe a little urgency, a little fear, a little manufactured confusion. And then, once the trust is gained, make the ask. Log in here, reset your password, confirm your wallet details. Not because the portal was compromised, but because the person was.
The attacker targeted these 30 companies, and the attacker knew what they were going to go after, gain confidence, and then all of a sudden make the ask. And the ask is either going to be in the form of, we need you to change your password. We need you to log in and do something to your account. With cryptocurrency, there's self-custody. And to do self-custody, you enter your wallet address into the platform, and then it's either a scheduled send or it's automatic, but you have the ability, the user has the ability to send your assets from the exchange, from the platform to your individual wallets. Once that attacker has gained that confidence and that trust with the customer, manipulation is the game and they want those assets.
So I think it's safe to say that just about every organization, regardless of industry, is using multiple SaaS tools right now. That brings with it an operational reliance and a security dependency when it comes to data that some may argue is equal parts risky and unavoidable, all in service of maintaining productivity. How do you view SaaS reliance, and how do you protect against it?
I think it's a great question. One of the things I think that's critical if I'm talking to a CRM vendor is I really want to understand who's touching my account. If these are the crown jewels of my company, I want to make sure that they understand that they're working with me. Number one, is it appropriate for a single admin in a CRM environment to have access to all customer tenants? Simple questions like this. And then also for those critical third parties, is there a quarterly, biannual touch point with the counterpart on, maybe it's not just the security team, but maybe the counterpart is making sure that the parts of the security team connect with the customer outreach team on the CRM side, making sure that any type of features that are introduced or any type of protocols that are established have oversight from a security team. Sometimes it's not about customer data. Sometimes it's actually about moving cryptocurrency or bank funds. One element that I think is underrated is data deletion. If somebody is on a marketing list, that's great. But if there's no engagement, no activity, it's okay to have rules in place, expire that type of PII data after a year, after 18 months, after X period of time. This data is absolutely critical to our business, and we want vendors and partners that have the same type of mentality.
For years, the story told to crypto users was simple. Take control. Be your own bank. What hadn't been discussed, at least not clearly and loudly enough, was the second half of that sentence. Here's what that actually requires of you when someone shows up in your inbox. Swan's response was not to promise perfect protection. It was to make customers harder to fool. Which messages to trust, which channels they actually use. Why you might want to have one email address for marketing noise and a completely different one for the accounts that can move your money.
It starts with education. If I am a customer of an exchange, of a provider, I want to be informed. I want to understand best practices on wallet custody. I want to be informed about what's the temperature of the threats. In 2022, we went on a huge campaign to educate our customers about being targets. Is it the form of a voicemail? Is it a text message? Is it an email? And on the education front, I would kind of add this. If I'm a privacy-focused individual, I want to make sure that I've got a marketing email and then I have a transactional email. And those transactional emails are the ones that I have with my most sensitive third-party financial providers. And I know that email is not should not be compromised. If it is out there, there's other issues to worry about. But a lot of customers don't think of it as I need a marketing front door and I need a transactional front door. And I think that's one way to limit the blast radius for the individual.
When a breach like this hits the headlines, the instinctive question is, who failed? But the harder question for CISOs is, who have we allowed to hold our crown jewels, and how often do we actually check their hands? HubSpot and Klaviyo became cautionary examples not because they were uniquely vulnerable, but because they were visible. In almost every organization, there's a quiet list of SaaS platforms that see customer data, transactional data, and sometimes even the routes money takes. And in many of those platforms, a single overprivileged admin account still has the keys.
Ceding trust to other companies is rather difficult. It should be a hard decision. You want the best provider out there. And I think in this particular case, when the breach happens with an outside third party, the postmortem is minimal. We focused a lot on having, I would say, playbooks ready for emergencies with all, not only CRM providers, but our digital custodians on our back end, making sure playbooks exist and making sure scenarios are at least discussed. Those range from not only data breaches, but also like loss of keys or outages. A postmortem with this one in particular, HubSpot and Klaviyo, I commend their teams to having an outreach element to work with their customers who were impacted. And then also regular cadence and reaching out and making sure we've got a point of contact with every third party vendor so that in the event of, or hey, we're running tabletop exercises, would you like to participate? I think those are key. The biggest postmortem in this one was customer education. This one took it up a level to the point where the industry was already being targeted and being attacked. The continual customer education on how to contact a company if there's problems. If phishing attacks are sent, here's what to expect. Our users really loved it, and they appreciate not only insight to the industry, but also the efforts that we're taking to make sure that they're well informed.
Act 3, the official blast radius. There's another uncomfortable truth here. Data that never existed in a vendor's systems can't be exfiltrated. Marketing platforms are built to keep lists warm, not to let them go. But from a CISO's point of view, stale PII isn't an asset, it's kindling soaked in gasoline. Shorter retention, automatic expiry for dormant contacts, and a willingness from vendors to delete what's no longer needed. These are no longer nice-to-have features. They're part of the blast radius calculation.
One of the metrics that we use is how many partners are we sharing critical data with, and what can we do to reduce that to zero. And making sure that these are the right third parties to help us with our business mission. A lot of those third parties are happy to sign a contract and turn on the service, and you can file a support ticket, but the support's not there, or it's very weak. And as a small company, as a small provider, I recognize that we're not your largest client, but we are a fairly critical client, and working with the third party to do a joint tabletop exercise in the case of a breach or a simple, certificate that's expired. I don't want to see a simple SOC 2. I don't want to see a simple ISO certification. I want to see your commitment to your security roadmap, making sure HubSpot or Klaviyo, if they're committed to changes, making sure those changes are implemented. The stakes are higher, and I think the SaaS providers need to understand that the stakes are higher.
Inside Swan, there could have been an easy out. This was a vendor problem. Their employee clicked and their tool was abused. But that's not how it feels when your customers are the ones getting the phishing calls. To a user, there's no neat separation between our SaaS provider and our brand. If they trusted Swan enough to deposit value, and that trust is shaken, the nuance of third-party risk doesn't really matter.
But you want to provide the best customer experience, the best trusted platform for your customers. And I think in this particular case, we let everybody down. We're looking at the events of what happened. Are we in control of somebody from a third party getting phished? No, we're not. But fundamentally, we let our customers down, and we are making sure that they are well-informed, educated. And I think the main point here is cryptocurrency is fairly new, and usage of cryptocurrency is fairly new. And one of my missions is to make sure that the people have the right education so that they're comfortable.
For more than a decade, the industry has been selling a simple promise. Hold your own keys, be your own bank, and don't trust intermediaries. What the HubSpot and Klaviyo incidents exposed is a different, quieter reality. Even in self-custody, there are still intermediaries, SaaS tools, marketing platforms, support systems. They shape how attackers find you. Being your own bank doesn't just mean holding your seed phrase. It means understanding that social engineering, phishing, and vendor breaches are now part of your personal threat model.
The industry has spent years trying to explain the benefits of being your own bank, but they have not explained and they have not carried up with, if you are choosing to be your own bank, here are the security protocols that you need to at least evaluate for your own self. Prior to cryptocurrency and prior to self-custody, there was very little user-targeted attacks, but the game has changed. And with the rise of Bitcoin, we are finding that a lot of the targets and a lot of the attackers are following that rise. As I mentioned, we're well overdue to make sure that these users understand that if they are interested in cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, that they are using appropriate safeguards and they understand the attacks that are coming to them.
On the SaaS side, the lesson is just as sharp. If you hold the marketing lists and the contact data and control the knobs that can nudge users into action, you're not just a platform. You are a potential launchpad for someone else's breach. Basic phishing training that checks an audit box isn't enough when your admins can see across dozens of crypto tenants at once. Real adversarial testing, targeted campaigns against your own support teams, and internal controls that assume an employee will click. Those are the table stakes now.
If I'm a SaaS provider, things that ring louder in postmortems for this type of data breach are the best phishing training. The industry and CISOs get caught up with satisfying compliance checkbox. And if they have a phishing training in place that's satisfying the audit, there's probably very little desire to change that. But if you are a company like HubSpot or Klaviyo or Salesforce in the news recently, you need to go above and beyond the basic phishing training. There are great providers out there that will do a targeted campaign to socially engineer their way into SaaS providers' customer support. Those projects are immensely valuable because you actually have somebody that a human is going to spend time and attack these companies and test their protocols. The stakes are higher. SaaS providers need to understand that.
As a CISO, you make purchasing decisions for security solutions and influence purchasing decisions when it comes to SaaS vendors. What should those vendors know about what you and other CISOs value most in relation to attacks like the ones experienced by HubSpot and Klaviyo?
There needs to be, we saw recently with AWS and some of the bigger attacks like Salesforce and last year CrowdStrike, like there is probably an over-reliance on SaaS-related platforms and technology, whether it's the resiliency or just uptime or actually having support over customer data. That needs to be looked at. What I want to do is find partners that want to support us in a manner that is secure, are willing to delete data after, actually implement a policy like data is deleted after X days or months or weeks. Long gone are the days of just signing up and using SaaS providing services and just turning on default and not looking at it.
All right, Scott, last question for you. You've been doing this for decades at this point. I imagine that you've had lots of wonderful mentors. What was the best piece of advice that you received that you can share with our audience of CISOs and security leaders?
I think the best piece of advice that I got from my old manager at Amazon, it was the first time in Amazon's history where they actually implemented payments tokenization. Prior to tokenization, a credit card number was just being floated around, and that credit card number was the tokenization. The advice was simply that we can operate at an absolutely pristine and high level of security, but you are not going to be able to do business. And I think that really put into perspective that you need to, as a CISO, need to understand the business. By understanding how business operates, you understand their priorities, what's important to them, and you're able to work as a better partner with all the stakeholders.
Scott, thanks for being on the podcast. It was great having you here. Hope you'll come back again and join us soon.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here, and I look forward to seeing all the stories that you guys have.
This is where the story bends away from the usual cybercrime script. In so many breaches, the final scene is familiar. There's ransom notes and drained wallets, executives reading apologies under fluorescent lights. Here, that didn't happen. HubSpot cut off compromised accounts and went public quickly. Crypto companies, including Swan, moved fast to warn users, not weeks later, but within hours or days. And as the dust settled, no public evidence emerged of large-scale wallet drains tied directly to these vendor incidents. Funds stayed where they were supposed to be. That doesn't mean the impact was trivial, though, of course. The real cost was measured in shaken confidence, in hard conversations with customers, in security leaders rewriting their third-party playbooks. But it also left behind something rare in this space: proof that clear communication and rapid response can blunt the edge of an attack. In a world where one employee's click at a vendor can ripple all the way down to a hardware wallet on a kitchen table, this is the new reality for CISOs. You can harden your own walls, but somewhere a stranger is still holding the map to your crown jewels. The question isn't whether that map will ever be targeted. The question is, what will you do, and how prepared will you be when it is? And so, we remain forever vigilant and always listening for the CISO signal. All episodes are based on publicly available reports, postmortems, and expert analysis. While we've done our best to ensure accuracy, some cybersecurity incidents evolve over time and not all details have been confirmed. Our goal is to inform and entertain, not to assign blame. Where facts are unclear, we've used cautionary language, and we always welcome your corrections. Thanks for listening to the CISO Signal.